Of you joining us. Thank you all so much for making space today. We'll get started in just a few moments. I see we've got a good group streaming in. As we get started, I'd invite the group to click on the chat box and switch your chat box not to just host and panelists, but switch it over to everyone so that you're sending a message to everyone if you can. There we go. Let me just change those settings so that you can do it. There we are. I'd encourage you to send a message to everyone and post in the chat what territory you're calling in from. If you don't know what territory you're calling in from, I'd invite you to take a moment to explore the land you're sitting in today. Just type the address into the tool that we'll share shortly. We checked out a few of these tools and actually had a great learning journey in discovering the many territories that overlap of Indigenous territories, especially my own here in Territory 1. Or sorry, Treaty 4 territory. Ooh, still just learning these. Okay. We'll get started in just a few moments as we have people streaming in. There we are. Hi, Jesse. Wonderful. Let me post as we're waiting people to join. There we are. Yeah, make sure that's set to speaking to everyone so we can all see where people are calling in from. Again, we'll share the native land tool so people can share that. The place that they're calling in from, and you can explore it yourself as well. Okay, to those of you joining us, we're just about to get started. If you've missed it, please share what territory you're calling in from as we wait to get started. If you don't know what territory you're calling in from, please take a moment to explore this land. Type your address into the tool nativeland.ca. It'll be shared in the chat once again by our marketing coordinator, David. Thanks again, David. Wonderful. Great to see so many voices joining in. Okay. Welcome, everyone, to this important event. Let's start in a good way. My name is Chris, and I am very grateful to be here hosting this event on Treaty 4 territory in what is today known as Manitoba. This has historically been inhabited by the Sioux, the Cree, the Métis, and the Anishinaabe peoples, among many others. As a settler on unwelcome land, I repeatedly am redefining my responsibility to decolonization, reconciliation, and the equitable and inclusive use of our future air resources. Today, despite my own unique identity, I hope to provide a bridge for our audience between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples as all of us listen and engage with the speakers who I will sit with today. I'm joined by David Dong, our marketing coordinator, and I'd also like to mention how our entire team has collectively helped to put this event together. Both J.R. Hammond, our executive director, and Darian Edwards, our Indigenous air mobility specialist. We're also so grateful to have the ongoing support of some incredible organizations. Our title sponsors, Van City Bank and Unither Bioelectronics, both of whom have helped us continue this work that is so important to us. Thank you. Thank you to our contributing organizations, Sky Canoe, First Nations Technical Institute, and Moose Cree First Nation. Individuals from each of these organizations will be present today. Thank you for showing up and bring your energy to this important conversation. As we think about this evolving evolution of aviation, I want to share this slide with you for those of you who are new to the world of what we're calling advanced air mobility. What we mean by this is this evolution of many new technologies changing the way we use our air resources. This conversation is key if we want to avoid a technology-first approach that only developing these resources instead of thinking about the historic adjustments that have been made by colonization. Because if we don't, we'll risk perpetuating inequities of the past. Only through holding space for these voices that have not been heard and the policies that respect these voices can we hope to make a better future for all of us. We begin again today. Before we get started, I'd like to bring awareness in my discomfort in hosting this event as a person of non-Indigenous heritage and the systemic privilege that I represent. Truthfully, the leaders that we have met so far have either performed in a speaking or moderating role with us previously, and we felt bad in bringing those people up again in unpaid roles, or we have Indigenous voices who are still developing their voice to take a stage like this. I want to begin this event by inviting anyone in the audience who would like to hold this role as moderator for next year to please reach out to us, as we would happily consider supporting you in doing so in a good way. I think the problem that I am up here acting as a moderator is also at the heart of the question I'm curious about today. Where are the Indigenous leaders in aviation? There are not enough of them. I've met some incredible leaders, but there are not enough. That's why we need this event. One thing I've been learning recently is that place matters, both in who you are and how you relate to others. On that note, the speakers that you'll meet with today are all from different communities. These voices are only one voice from their communities and don't represent the entire community, and especially can't be assumed to be representative of all Indigenous communities. A quick note on the format of this event is it will take a more liquid form. Rather than a structured panel discussion with slides, we're going to bring one speaker into our conversation at a time as the conversation flows. If we have, I'd love to bring to the conversation Phoebe. She's from Moose Cree First Nation, and recently at Moose Factory there was a power outage. So if she's available, I would love to call her up onto the stage, whether she has video or audio.
Unmute.
Hi.
There we go.
There we are.
Day.
Oh, great to see you.
Yes, we had a power outage because we had a pretty big, intense storm this morning, and sometimes it affects the power lines. So living in a remote island. So yeah, so I'm glad to be here. Our power got restored at 12:30. So
oh wow, just in time. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you sharing your energy with us.
Oh, thank you for the invite, and I'm glad to be here to speak about my experience becoming a drone pilot and how I want to eventually, have other drone pilots here in my home community up along the James Bay coast of where I'm from.
Yeah, you've had some incredible stories that you've shared with us previously. I'd love if there's just kind of an introduction you'd like to make for yourself so the audience could also get to know you.
Well, I'm a musher. I kind of came to that through being in education for a number of years and telling kids, go follow your dreams. And I think one thing that was really in my family and what I really needed to do was to become a musher, to take care of I started out with stray dogs, and then just getting out on the land. I started skidjorning with my dogs, 2 of them at the beginning, and then I continued with getting a small sled. And one of the things that I eventually wanted to do was to share this with people and to share it with my family. I'm mentoring my nieces. My youngest niece is just turned 7, so she's excited to get out on the sled this winter, but she's been around the dogs her whole life. And my other nieces are 11 and 14 or 13, and they'll be helping guide some of our weekend programs. And yeah, continuing the tradition of my grandfather, who was a World War II vet, and he worked with his father, who delivered mail and goods up along the James Bay and Hudson Bay coast by boat in the summertime, and then by dog team in the winter. So my great grandfather, Robbie Linklater, was a kind of contractor for the Hudson Bay Company based in Moose Factory. So I can actually feel that connection when I'm out on the land with my dogs. And that's something that I love. And what I want to do with this drone training, instead of taking selfies, because you see some of the pictures, I'm just like this. And I'm like, I wish people could see the land and just connect with it. And it's so different from being out there on a snow machine. You know, you have your helmet on and you have the hum of the, you know, yeah, you're going whatever kilometers. But when you're out there with the dogs, it's just, I can hear them breathe. I'm pretty sure they hear me huffing and puffing too. But I want to connect the kids and the youth and the young at heart. You know, come meet my dogs, come, and then we can use the drones to take, you know, take footage of them, but also use it in, you know, when we have our dog yard and the trails, we can use that to kind of do safety checks or to just kind of keep track of everybody and kind of, you know, that's what I want to kind of work on. But I'm also a filmmaker, so I'm telling the story of my dog team and how I reconnected with mushing and how I want to share that story and that journey.
Yeah. Well, you also shared, I think you were previously an educator as well, were you not?
Yes. I worked in my home community and also worked in California, and I traveled to the UK at one time in my life in my 20s. But yeah, I've worked as an EA. I worked in the library here at my school. I've taken teaching jobs with Northern College up and down the coast to teach, you know, so I've been in that education field. And I think one of the things I'm taking from that is our need to connect our people in all types of areas is back to the land. You know, and being a daughter and granddaughter of residential school survivors, I want to hold people the government and any other agencies accountable to Action 93. You know, take down those barriers. You know,
say more about Action 93.
Yeah, Action 93 is to return to land-based programming, to reconnect our youth and what the things that were. I wouldn't say it was lost. I would say it was just our connection to it, our understanding and connection to. For me, it was the care of the dogs, because I grew up around huskies. I grew up around my grandfather's huskies, and he was going to teach me that. But in a lot of First Nations communities, and you know, our community is no different. You know, there were dog calls, but that was one of the things that was one of the things that came from, you know, the RCMP and Indian agents trying to get kids, you know, apprehended to residential schools that they threatened. And my grandfather was one of them, that they threatened him to, you know, we're going to shoot your team, or, you know, we got to take your kids to residential school. Wow. So we know what how that story ended in our family, that all of my father's family went to residential school because of that. And then, you know, lack of vet care, being remote, being in isolated communities, you know, it's expensive flights.
Yeah.
You know, when you're trying to, you know, trying to address the needs of your, you know, dog, your cat, and, you know, yeah, just trying to, and that's one thing I want to work with my community too. But I know that's taken away from the drone experience, but you know, it's and Action 93, but it's just that land base and having the drone and the footage to be able to communicate what that relationship is. And I think having that vantage point of, you know, having a drone follow us and to see what land there is, because we get so used to being on a reserve, and that's such a different European construct that our land, you know, Nitaski, I belong to the land. The land doesn't belong to me. So, yeah.
Well, I remember I was struck when I first met you talking about you adopting these new technologies, but really using them, as you just said, as a way of connecting to the land and connecting not just you, but other people, and sharing this importance of connecting to the land. I'd love to hear more about kind of, because there's people that I've spoken to who are less familiar with these new technologies. What makes you interested in these new technologies, and what opportunities do you see for them?
I think it's just adapting. I think it's, you know, I don't have a very long selfie stick. And I want people to see the land that you actually see when you're out there with the dogs. And and I just think back to the generations before that didn't have technology, that didn't have a photo, to say that this is where the trail is. They didn't have GPS. It was all their understanding. And I think that's where, as people, we are lost to that connection. But it's the kind of, the braiding of those technologies and our language, and our, understanding of where the land is, and our language with it, describing it. So I think that's important to kind of embrace those technologies.
Yeah. Well, can you tell me a bit more about bridging education and drones together? Tell me about this vision for a drone academy you shared with me.
I think it's just trying to kind of entice kids, because in my community, we had a membership meeting for our members, and there's when you think of Moose Factory, you think of the NHL star Jonathan Chichu, and there's all these kids wanting to go into sports, and not every kid is good at sports or hockey or whatever, but there's a lot of people that connect with animals and dogs. And there's that everybody connects and understand. And at this meeting, they talked about, what other things can we do? And I was like, hello. I was trying to get, but I think using that technology, and, kids are more versed with their games and their controls and stuff. And that's the thing that I was finding challenging, because honestly, I dated myself being in that, I'm 49, so I learned on Atari. Yeah. I'm really going OG. So, but I think that utilizing that, and I think putting those tools in the hands of kids can help them not just connect with the land, but, that could be a way of them creating maybe stories or films, or to document things. And I think that's giving those tools and technology back to people, and seeing what they can do with it. And as far as being a drone, the Mushing Drone Academy, it's just another idea to try to get them to come in, document what they do. And I think that's just another vantage point, because the other, I took out my drone for this, but a couple of Christmases ago, my family gave me a GoPro. So I kind of have that too as an option. So, and I have my, my regular camera. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of footage will be happening this winter, but it's going to be exciting to see, what kids are going to respond to, and it's giving them options, and, creating safe environments for them to go out and take risks, and, and be challenged, and to have some sense of accomplishment. So, yeah.
Oh, great. There's just all these themes about engaging youth, and in encouraging and growing these traditions that are known, and using new technologies to do those things that are so important.
Yeah.
There's some interesting threads there. Maybe I can bring Gabe up on the stage now, because in her work with Sky Canoe, she's also working with Indigenous communities in a slightly different way. So Gabe, if you want to jump onto the screen, say hello. Would love for you to introduce yourself, as I think there's some great parallels here.
Hi, thank you for having me. Yes, actually, it was really interesting hearing you talk about a drone school. I will introduce myself in a second, but really quickly, one of the things we are doing is we're actually trying to put together a drone school in the Mississaugas of Scugog Island Nation, and it's literally that. It's just a school to teach people how to fly drones, because so many of the youth love it, but they don't necessarily get a chance to try it out right away. So the results so far have been great. We just need to put a program in place. So it's interesting to see that you want to do a school, because I think, like you said, I think the results will be great. Kids love it, and they're very good. They're better than we are, unfortunately.
Oh no.
That is, a side effect, but a good side effect.
Yeah.
But yes, my name is Gabe. I am from Sky Canoe. I am the abnormal one of this group. I am not an Indigenous woman. I'm actually here representing the company Sky which is an indigenous owned company. We make drones, a little bit different. We don't make little ones, we make cargo drones. So we're talking about 20 foot, which is, it's like a 1 to 2 seater manned aircraft when you're trying to think of the size. And the idea is to carry cargo. Nothing fancy. It's literally getting cargo from point A to point B. But as many of you know, northern communities, it's a big hassle. Like you were just saying, everything is super expensive. It's expensive because it's hard to get up there. So we were trying to find an easier way to get things up there. Drones is apparently the answer. But the other big point of Sky Canoe that I want to point out is drones are not some mystical, power that can only be run by the big Boeing companies and Bombardier and all that. So these drones are run, they organize, everything that you do is within the community. So the pilots come from the community, the people who deal with the logistics, everything can be done there. This does not require, some sort of 20 years of education to do these things. So that's a priority, is to keep everything in the communities where they're supposed to be, instead of attempting to outsource everything.
Yeah. Awesome. Can you give me a sense, Gabe, of the type of cargo you're talking about and the types of communities that you're working with?
Yeah, so cargo. It's anything and everything. Actually, I think the most surprising one for me, highest demand, was diapers.
Oh.
Diapers is a big one. Diapers are really hard to get. They're expensive, but they're really light. Well, they get compact. They're relatively light things, so you would never think that that was an issue. But no, we're looking at mainly just normal everyday items. Yeah, you can start looking at food and medical supplies as well. That's something that we are looking at as well. But the focus is just everyday supplies, essentials, but also desires. I think people forget that. Yes, we need toilet paper, we need diapers, but chocolate bars, toys, also just as vital. And it's ridiculous how expensive things get simply because no one's willing to make the trip out. I say that, I don't mean it's an easy trip to make out. I understand. Roads get closed, it's dangerous, it's hazardous. But at least with the drone, your cost is a fraction of the cost. You don't have that, well, let's be fair, the danger of life. When you're driving on icy roads, it is dangerous. But yeah, so mainly essentials, but we want to include anything really. Wow. Just not people.
Yeah.
I know someone asked me that, but we're not looking at manned aircraft. These are just items.
Okay. Well, I see there's a parallel, especially when we spoke last about your own personal mission to do this type of work and why this work matters to you, and also in what Phoebe raised. And you can tell she has a personal mission of connecting people to the land. I'd be curious, how do you relate to your work at Sky Canoe, and why is it meaningful to you?
So I think the big thing is the environment. I came into this because I've always been focused on the environment. I initially wanted to go into environmental engineering, but this was a while back, is how I'm going to describe this, back in the day when that wasn't a thing yet. So I've always been looking at different ways of improving this. But as many people know, the saying, what is it? It's a tribe in, I think, Brazil, or the Amazon forest, which is the most eco-friendly group of people in the world. It's just one of those things that Indigenous communities are usually where you should be looking. Environmentally, they are, they're the leaders in the world. So a lot of our focus in the company is, yes, there's a lot of social aspects, but a big thing in the company is environmental. you know, how to reduce all the emissions, but also planes have negative effects. How do we reduce this? One of our biggest projects came from one of the communities we work with, who made it very clear that it was very important that we don't hit birds. Seems a bit, you know, odd to say this, because you might be thinking, well, that's shouldn't have to be said. But when it comes to the aviation field, this is actually quite new. Most planes of this size just sort of hit them and keep
Cruise
going
on through. Yeah.
You know, like it is what it is. Yes, I can see some questions, so I will be answering that in a second. But yeah, it's one of those things that the environmental aspect, the higher importance, I want to say, is what drew me into this. And I love that it always wins. Money is never the winning factor, ever. It has never once come up as a thing. So that's what drew me into it and kept me, I guess. You know, I can't complain. I love it. It's a different focus, but it's where the focus should be. And I just saw a quick question. Sorry.
Yeah, please bring it into the conversation.
Winter as summer. It's a great question, and I will actually talk about that. Winter is a pain. I am from Quebec. We are a land of snow, a huge amount of snow. That being said, I hate the cold, so it's a wonder that I'm a Canadian. Winter transportation is a pain. I'm not gonna kid about this. Anyone who's looking to get into this, be prepared that however long you spent in summer designing, testing prototypes, you're gonna spend 5 times longer on the winter side of it.
Yeah.
Good. That being said, yes, it is definitely possible. Effectiveness depends on the type of power system you're going with. I'm kind of going a little bit technical, but the gas is not too bad. There's a little bit more work to be done, but it's comparable. When you're starting to look at electric and hydrogen, now you're looking at reduced efficiency. That's correct, but it's still doable. And the benefits of those options versus gas far outweigh the lower efficiency. I can go more technical, but I won't. I don't think this is that type of talk. Yeah.
No, great. That's great. I know that, there's lots of problems with icing as well in navigating those cold temperatures. I know we had quite a few questions for the people signing up to this event from academic institutions that were interested in how, because I know you have some partnerships, I think with Carleton University. Would love to hear for the academic institutions and audience in the room, how do those partnerships develop? Or if they wanted to work with a group like yours, how might they do so?
Yeah, so we partnered up with Carleton, I think back in 2019, so about 2-3 years ago now. We actually have quite a strong relationship with them. We have 3 graduate students, including myself, actually, from Carleton University. How it came about, Professor Laliberté, he's a professor at Carleton University. He's a big name when it comes to drones in Canada. He was pushing. We were looking, and we kind of just met up. It happens, a lot of the smaller companies, expos and stuff, that's your best bet to kind of see where people are looking. But my recommendation is just reach out, especially when it comes to drones. Manned aviation, you're looking at they've been around for a while, they have specific procedures. When it comes to drones, we're very new, we very much, flying in the blind in certain areas. So it's a lot more R&D than you would necessarily see in the manned. So on that note, working with the academic sides is something that you'll see a lot more. You just have to reach out to see what they are working on. But I would recommend you reach out. I don't think the companies are necessarily, we didn't reach out to Carlton, let's just say. Carlton reached out to us, and we thought that'd be a good relationship. And so far, it has been great. But it depends on what you're doing.
Right.
Anyone interested in UAVs, pass drones, whatever you want to call them. Bird detection is a big one lately. The cold, icing, stuff like that. It's a big academic field right now. It's a big research field. So if you're working on that, I would just reach out to drone companies in particular, in specific.
Okay.
It's not very helpful. I know, I apologize.
Okay. No, I think it's great and very useful for the academics in the audience. I'd like to come back to kind of the land and the communities that you're working in, because I know you mentioned at the beginning that you act as kind of an outsider or the odd person out. Would love to hear what your experiences has been working for an Indigenous-led organization, working with Indigenous communities. How do you see these technologies being received by Indigenous communities? What are those pieces that you might share?
Okay, well, one thing I will say is I never feel like an outsider. I always feel super welcome. That's never, I was invited to a powwow this season, which was incredible. I was very honored to be able to attend. But the other thing I will say, I'm going to take the powwow as an example. I bought drones. It was one of those things that I didn't think so. I didn't think to bring any, but they recommended. They said, you know, you have little drones for the kids. And I was thinking, a powwow, drones?
Yeah.
Seems like an odd, obviously I didn't know any better. And I just, you know, I listened to them as you should when you don't know. And they loved it. It's, frankly, they were better flyers than I was. Again, it's always embarrassing. But no, the introduction of the technology into the communities, as far as I have been seeing, welcome arms, people are happy to have it. It's minimally invasive, I want to say. Like, it's not taking over, it's not huge, it's not taking over, you know, open fields and turning them into infrastructure. It's not like the drones use existing fields, existing, you know. I do think that's important to point out, that it's been really welcome so far. We haven't really had any complaints. If anything, I find people are excessively welcoming, which is really nice. But I also think it plays a part that we're not coming in and taking over, or, well, we don't take over, but we don't tell them that they have to, you know, turn this beautiful forest into, you know, a giant building.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I remember you mentioned in a previous conversation about the desire of Indigenous communities and people to not want to be moved. And I thought that was a really thing that stuck with me. Could you share a little bit more about that? Because I've been thinking about that in leading up to our conversation.
Yeah, so this isn't coming from me. This was one of the things that's important to the company, is trying to figure out what the community wants. Yes, I will answer that question. Sorry, really quickly. Sorry, I can see the questions come up.
Yeah, and they're popping up. Yeah, I know.
It's Professor La Liberté. I can.
Yeah, actually, we can connect you with that professor as well. Happy to.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, Jeremy La Liberté. That's great.
Yeah. Sorry, what was I saying? Oh, yes. Always trying to figure out what the community actually wants. That was a big one. So way back when we started this company, that was the big goal. That has continued on. And one of the things we were trying to get people more involved, not just directly right now in the company, but also in the other, because again, there's a lot that goes into these things.
Yeah.
And we wanted to see what people were saying. And some of the people are involved in a lot of outreach, a lot of, you know, jobs, connecting with communities. I'm saying this in a very generalized term.
Yeah.
Some of them are all from the same nation, some were from different nations. But one of the most common comments we got back was that it wasn't the lack of jobs. That's not the issue. There's a lot of jobs. A lot of companies are going to communities and saying, here's some free education and a free job when you're done your education. but a lot of these jobs are really far away, which most of the youth don't want to do. And I think that's reasonable. That's one of those things that, I happen to like living near my family, so I can understand wanting to stay there. And, like Phoebe was talking about, you feel attached to your land. You don't want to leave it. That's defeats the purpose. So that became also a priority. How can we make it that all the jobs, or at least a huge majority of the jobs, are based exactly where you are? In our case, that was easy to do because of what we do. I'm not saying it's easy for everyone, but in our case, cargo drones do leave from that area. But yes, that was one of the things that I found. It's not a lack of jobs. It's not a lack of education. It's not necessarily a lack of interest. People find it interesting, but they want jobs close to home, which, again, I think we can all understand.
Yeah, very much so. I think that there's a really common thread here. I just think this is a great transition to invite Jenna up, as she has talked about, as well as many of the pilots we'll chat with today, has an interest in kind of connecting back to the land and to her community. So Jenna, would love it if you could share a little bit about yourself and your experience now that you're moving from kind of the drone space into traditional aviation, because this is a little bit of a different space, but would love to hear what's moved or shifted from what Phoebe or Gabe have shared.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about the drone stuff so much. I'm pretty focused on like central aviation, as I am here at FNTI. But yeah, I'm from Curve Lake, Ontario, which is roughly 3 hours, 3-hour drive, 2.5 hours from Toronto, like 45 minutes from Peterborough. And yeah, I'm really invested in my community, and really invested in maintaining the land. Like, I'm from a peninsula, like we have a lot of ways to connect to our culture there, and from wild rice to like we have a powwow every year, and I've been lucky enough to be a big part of that. And I find being here at FNTI, they also like bring that connection as well, like pretty focused on Tyendinaga, the area here. But it's a lot of cultural based learning, which is really, really important to me as well. Yeah, but as far as drones go, I understand that FNTI is actually beginning to organize a drone course. I think we see the drones out sometimes when we're flying, and that's something I'd be really interested in taking part of. And I think it is definitely the future of aviation. Yeah, and I don't really have much to say about the drones, but I know here at FNTI we're really good with connecting to our culture, and in every course we have our cultural aspects to it, and we even have some courses that are specifically based in our culture, which is like really, really unique for aviation. And I know there's no other program like it anywhere else in the world, but yeah, I'm really lucky to be here at FNTI, and they always are so focused on the environment, so focused on our culture, which is really, really nice, especially with aviation. I know being a pilot, I can't say that I'm so environmentally friendly, but obviously the future of aviation is going to head in that direction. And yeah, and that's what we're focused on now.
Yeah. Was there anything in what Phoebe or Gabe shared that really struck you, even related to just like the importance of culture?
I loved what Phoebe was saying about about the land and how she feels that connection, because I'm a big outdoors woman, and I find that it does help connect to the culture, and that's something that we've kind of let slip a little bit. I can't speak for everyone, but I know specifically in my community, a lot of the land-based learning, land-based like activities that happened when I was growing up don't happen as much now. And I don't know if that's because of COVID or just moving forward, like in life, everybody, but like, I think that's something important and that needs to be brought back and like needs to be thought about more.
How do you think we could think about it more?
Well, I would say just including it in everyday life, like including it, like you do your personal, do what you can do personally and spread it as you can, right? So like joining cultural programs. I know FNTI offers a lot of cultural workshops that we can attend, or just making that more accessible to everybody as well. Because I know like a lot of times it's hard to find somewhere near where you live, especially everybody in remote places. So I would say just doing what you can when you can, like.
Yeah. Well, I remember reading statistics when I was learning about FNTI, and they are like far and away have the highest gender ratio and have the highest Indigenous population. Like they're just crushing it from everything that I can see. What do you think stops other flight schools doing traditional aviation from doing some of the things that FNTI is doing or getting some of the students they're getting?
I think a lot of it has to do with outreach. Like Joanne, our dean, is just like an amazing woman, and she goes out there, she talks to people, she gets it, the word out there, like figures everything out. She's constantly finding sponsors. Like, we know we had I had a tragic fire, a hangar fire, and the government only gives you so much money back, right? So because it's a government funded institution, but she just like rallied everybody, came together, like found sponsors anywhere she could, like. And I would say just having those connections and like just maybe connecting with more Indigenous people would help with that. But I know Joanne is just like a rock star. I don't know how she does it, but yeah. And also it's a good, apart from that, they get women and Indigenous people, and then like they keep them, right? Because of the culture here is so inclusive, and like I've never felt out of place here. I've never felt less than or anything. And even like from everywhere, like instructors, like flight instructors and academic instructors, like everything is so inclusive and understanding, and they want you to include your cultural practices. Like they promote it, which is amazing. Like it's such an amazing place to be, amazing to go to school. And it's the only place like it. Like I'm really lucky to be here, really lucky that it's so close to my home too. But yeah, mostly find a Joanne, basically.
Amazing.
That kind of outreach. Oh yeah, and also like women specific events. Like we go, obviously this isn't just a specific FNTI thing, but we go to the Northern Lights Gala every year, which is a great networking event for women in aviation. And the fact that that's like something so accessible to us, and Joanne, like she gets us excited about these things. She gets us excited about networking. And if you know aviation, you know a lot of it's about networking, right? And it's about who you know. And having access, we always have access to this like web of people here at FNTI. And like you find people from FNTI everywhere. And that's like really helpful in the industry. I'm sure it'll be helpful in my career.
Yeah. I'm a huge Joanne fan as well. I see there's a question from another amazing woman pushing how important this work is. Anna, she just posted a question. I'm going to hold that question, Anna, until we get to our group discussion, because I think that's a great question, asking about what actions we can all take. But I think this is a great time to bring up Tess. I think she also has some very relevant experience. Thank you so much, Jenna. We'll chat with you in just a second. Tess, would love to hear from you if you could pop up onto the screen and share what shifted for you in listening to all of these amazing people share their stories.
Hi, so I want to piggyback on what Jenna said, that FNTI is amazing. I think I could vouch for that also, because after the fire happened, I had to go to Cornwall to a different flight school to finish off, because we only have Cessnas there.
Right.
And at a different flight school, I felt very much like I was just a price tag to them. Whereas at FNTI, you really feel like a family. Your instructors care. We have instructors that went through the program themselves. Whereas at a different flight school, it was very much like check the time that they sat down with me to discuss stuff, and check the time when they got up to leave.
Right.
So I want to piggyback on what Jenna is saying, is that FNTI is very good about making you feel at home and in there.
Yeah, great. Was there anything that sparked kind of excitement in you or other emotions when you heard from Phoebe or Gabe? Any parallels from the drone world?
I'm not too much on the drone world, but I did grow up in the Northwest Territories. So my stepdad grew up, he's a musher. So I grew up mushing as well as a young kid. So that I was kind of like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
But yeah, I grew up very traditional. So everything that she says is like, yeah, let's keep the tradition alive, even though obviously this world's advancing in technologies, but trying to keep the tradition without losing it all or keeping people still interested in it, I think is big.
Yeah, great. In terms of becoming a pilot, you were just telling me before this call that you're done your training, you're going to go out and find a job. What are you excited for in this industry?
There's always something different. Like you can fly floats, you can fly on skis. Like it's never just a desk job that you're sitting there every day. You expect the same thing. It's always different. And I love flying. I think it's the best feeling, like just being out there and the calmness and everything.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for the opportunities out there.
Well, now that you've just done it, I'd be curious because I know we have some Indigenous youth on the call. What are the barriers that you think other Indigenous people might face in becoming a pilot like yourself?
Moving out of home communities, I would say is like the biggest struggle, because there is a lot of the communities are small, so it's like a culture shock to even move into these big cities, and just being out of your hometown is like, what? Like you're not used to it. Even the traffic, you're like on the 401, I was like, oh my god, like why has there been so many cars around? Loneliness, I think loneliness is a big one, because I mean, I moved out of the Northwest Territories. I'm in the middle of driving home as per being in a vehicle. And that, like, we're on a 50-hour drive back home. So like it's not easy, because then you have to move far away and it's expensive to get back into the north, that you can't really afford to just go home and visit easily, would be a big one. And I think there's not many Indigenous, like I don't know anybody from my home community that's Indigenous and a pilot. So you don't have any role models to kind of look up to or think like, oh, they could, like, they've done it, I could do it, kind of deal. And I think that's a big one, like people realizing that they can do it. Like if you can do it, someone else can do it, you know? And I think generational trauma too comes into it. I don't think that's something that could be necessarily just like, oh, let's fix it. But I think just being aware of it in these schools and knowing that it exists and being able to accommodate for it and stuff. Like at FNTI, we have SSF, so they're student success facilitators, and they're like amazing. Like if you ever need anything, they're there for you. They're always checking on you. Like that helps a lot.
Oh, that's great. I'd love to hear more about kind of what you hope from your career. Do you want to go back and work in your home community? Do you want to go travel internationally? What's on the target for you?
So I'm moving back to Yellowknife, the Northwest Territories, just because it's the capital, so it's bigger. So the aviation there is a lot bigger. So I'm hoping to get a job in Yellowknife. I definitely like to do some bush flying, hopefully get my float rating and fly some skis and do some fun like, northern flying. And then maybe one day when I want to like relax a little, I'll aim more for the airlines. But I definitely want to do some like really bush flying for a couple of years.
Awesome. Well, I'm so grateful you want to do that, because I recently just took my basic drone pilots rating, and this was drones, not even pilots. There is so much to know about clouds, about the atmosphere, and just, I was like, wow, I'm really glad people do this, because I just sit on the plane and have the pilot get me there. So thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I'd love to, just with the time we have left before we get into our group discussion, which I'm really excited for, I'd love to bring up Todd and share his experiences, because Todd, from what he shared with me, has had a varied career. You kind of worked all over the place in this industry. And so would love to kind of hear some of the things that have shifted for you. What have you noticed from everything that everyone shared, Todd? Maybe you can just open up with that.
What I've noticed is, like, you know, everyone's like pretty like common with like connecting culturally and wanting to be keep our culture like growing. I'm from Iqaluit, Nunavut, so you know, Tessie was saying, like she has to travel far. I'm kind of in the same situation as her. For me, it's a 3-hour flight down to Ottawa and then a 2.5-hour train ride or drive to FMTI. So there is quite a distance, not as much as hers. And the nice thing for me is that like I have to fly. I don't have to drive just because there is no roads in to Nunavut to the south.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think we've just heard about the pilots. I know you've had a varied career. I would love to hear a bit about the different jobs you've had, because some of the students or youth that we've had reach out, they've asked kind of, what are the different jobs you can have in aviation? I'd love if you could share a few of yours or even other jobs that you know of in this industry other than just being a pilot.
So I actually started out as a flight attendant with this company called First Air back home. So I was at that for about a half a year. And then I switched over to being a customer service agent, and been a customer service agent pretty much ever since then. And I attended Canada College in North Bay, Ontario as well for aviation.
Okay. What are the other jobs that you kind of see around you? I know Tira Fraser, one of our favorite humans that's in this space, has really also talked about aerospace mechanics as a really important job. Is that one you see around as well?
Yeah, definitely. So when I was in Canada College, like there were some courses where we did where like we learned a little bit about what the mechanics do and things like that. So there's like, you know, structures where they repair like the aircraft structure and like the skin of the aircraft. There's also avionics dealing with all the instruments, and then your AMEs, which do with like the engines and tires and things like that.
Yeah.
As for like other jobs, like you know, there's always like managers, directors, vice presidents, president and CEO. There's human resources, accounting, like all kinds of jobs that people could get into. If you know, if like it's not just being a pilot and like not having an office job, you can also have an office job in aviation.
Okay. Todd, are there any jobs, we just talked about kind of staying connected to the land or staying at home and not being moved? Are there any jobs within aviation that would allow you to stay home? Is that just a pilot, or could you do other jobs?
Definitely. Yeah, could be a mechanic back home as well if I wanted to. They're always looking for those. There's people working at cargo, things like that. And well, what I do now as a customer service agent.
Yeah. Okay. Well, before we bring the whole group back together, I'm really excited for a group discussion. I'd love to hear specifically what excites you about your future in aviation.
What I'm looking forward to in my future in aviation is just being able to fly back home and see the land from the skies, and you know, try and be a role model for the younger generation behind me, showing them that anyone can do this. Like Tessie was saying, we do have like a few Inuit pilots back home, but there's only like a handful of them.
Okay, great. Well, I'm really excited for you to be up in the skies, helping us. As I was just saying, I'm very grateful for your skill set. I think I've told it to my friends, it's kind of like playing a guitar. I like the idea of doing it, but when you start realizing how much time it takes to get good at doing it, you realize you don't want it as much as you thought you wanted it. So I'm glad you wanted it as much as I thought I wanted it. Thank you, Todd. Wonderful. Okay, well, I'll bring everyone back up onto the stage. David, if you could help with that, everyone turning on their video. And we just have to have a roundtable discussion. And I think the question that Anna asks, I think a really great one to start with. So she asked in the chat, what is an action that everyone on this call could do to bring the Indigenous voice into advanced aviation companies and our operations more generally? It's a big question, but take it as you want. Whoever wants to jump in, we can kind of start the group chat with that one. I can post it in the chat again for everyone.
Okay, since no one else wants to, I will, but my answer will be very short as the non-Indigenous person here. You want to hear their voices, you need to put them in leadership positions. Me being in a leadership position to represent Indigenous women, that's not a thing. That's silly. You want to hear their voices, put them in leadership positions, put them in a position where they have the power to do the changes they want. Having, groups and committees and all that, that's fun, that's great. But when the committees don't have the power to enact the changes, what's the point?
Yeah. Anyone else have comments? I think that's crucial. I mean, I mentioned it at the beginning. I think I want someone to take my place next year if anyone's interested. Oh, do I hear Phoebe? Oh, you might be muted, Phoebe. If you jump on the... Oh, Phoebe, can you hear me? You might be muted. I can't hear you. No.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay. I'll probably say this for the third time now, but yeah, put my name in for maybe co-hosting the panel next year. So we'll keep in touch and hopefully I'll have some footage of the dogs.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So right now it's just the selfies and things, but it, just to kind of echo what Gabrielle was saying, it is about just putting women in leadership roles, about mentoring them, supporting them, and telling them that it's okay to make mistakes too.
Yeah.
It's okay to learn. Let's change that mindset that Indigenous people have had the sacred knowledge. Yes, we have, but at the same time we adapted, and I think that's something that young people stepping into leadership roles, as their voice shakes, as they're uncertain, we also need to stand by them and say, you can do this. And my niece, she just turned 11 and she has a goal of mushing with 4 dogs this winter. She's 11 years old. And I think that's incredible, and I think I'm going to do everything that I can to support her, to keep her on that track, to keep her focused on the dogs, and they're in the present moment. Like they don't care about what had happened really, they or what's in the future. They want to have your attention and cooperation now. And I think that's what we need to do for our future leaders.
Yeah. Thanks, Phoebe. Anyone else want to jump in? Otherwise, I've got another question from the audience here.
I think you could jumping on what they said. If you look at Joanne, our dean, she was an Indigenous, the first woman in our program, and since she's become the dean, now she has the school taking about half women, half men into the program. So that's an example of put someone Indigenous in these spots, and they can make a difference.
Yeah, great. Yeah, again, huge advocate for this, and Phoebe, I may be taking you up on that next year as a co-moderator. I see a question in the chat, and it's also actually in my notes, is this question around networking. Some people in coming to this event had asked about it, and I think it's key given that we just saw someone ask about it in the chat. I'd love to hear from the audience how industry could engage with communities and those interested in aviation, whether you're speaking about it from the Indigenous people that are interested, or from communities that are interested in networking, organizations that are interested in networking with communities. Jenna, maybe I'll call on you. What do you think? What's your thoughts on the importance of networking?
I think it's very important, especially in aviation. I would say some ways that we could do it is like with recruitment, like sending recruiters. I know specifically at our school, we have this amazing female instructor, Daniela, and I know she goes and she recruits as well. I think also more networking events are really important because we go to that gala that I was talking about, the girls, but there's nothing for our guys, and there's no way for them to meet anyone. So maybe just an Indigenous specific networking event would be amazing, or just recruitment. And social media is a really great tool that should be used a lot more often, especially because everyone's on it. So I'd say that's the best way as well.
Great. Anyone else? Ideas around networking? Phoebe, I feel like you've got something to say. Jump in. No?
Well, she had mentioned the social media. It's just try and grab their attention using the footage, and I'm trying to figure that out too, to put it in my TikTok so I can mix up. Yeah, it's just embracing that. And I really think I probably need somebody more versed. So I'll be looking for a partner for that. But I think it's just about engaging and going into schools and making things like a fun after school thing, or something that is different from the education part of it. It's just the actual hands-on. So
okay. Gabe, is Sky Canoe doing anything in terms of recruiting or networking that might be worthy of noting here?
Yes, the answer is yes. Do I know much about this? No. I am the worst person to talk. I am the least social. Can't tell because I talk a lot. But I am actually very bad at all the social media stuff. I sound very old when I say this, I know. Networking is an issue that we are trying to overcome. And by overcome, I mean we're trying to expand it out. It's mainly word of mouth. Right now, we are trying to establish schools and stuff like that, and hopefully expand out from there. But I'm not really the one. I apologize. I'm the worst at stuff like this. I'm great with little kids, but not the older kids or adults.
No need for apologizing. Well, Gabe, I just want to call it, I'm grateful that you showed up and pushed through the discomfort of being more of an introvert to share your story, because not enough people who don't like being on stages make it important to stay on the stage. So thank you.
I'm more uncomfortable being a non-Indigenous woman. I would have preferred having an Indigenous person take my place, but unfortunately, it's a very busy time of the year right now for us. So I am what you guys got. Sorry.
No. We're not sorry. Thank you so much for showing up and sharing your perspective, Gabe. I'd love to go around the table and hear just broadly whether or not there's a specific use case, either in traditional or in drones, that excites you. And when I say use case, for the students in our world, use case just means a way to use aviation. So that could be, I'm really excited to take these types of cargo up into northern communities, or I'm excited for this thing to be possible in aviation. I'd love to hear, perhaps starting with Gabe, as we were just chatting with you, and you might be most familiar with this term. What's an example or use case that you're really excited about? Maybe not either just coming online or will soon to come online for aviation.
Well, this is very personal to me. I am the technical side of Sky Canoe. I mainly work on the autopilot and all the onboard systems. So one of the more exciting for me is not actually necessarily what we're carrying it, but looking at the different energy sources. So I think that's one of the most exciting for me is hydrogen. So it's not now, so don't get overly excited, everyone. I apologize. It's still a couple of years in the making, probably. But that is, I think, I would say one of the most exciting parts is making it work with hydrogen.
I'll jump over to the next person on my screen. Phoebe, what excites you about the next era of aviation?
I just think if we're really going to, move forward with our the TRC kind of calls to
Yeah.
action. You know, we need to put our land and the view of our land back into the hands of our youth, and to help have them reconnect with that. So I would be excited to see, you know, land-based programs embracing this technology and, you know, making it part of maybe their curriculum or after-school programming to get them their first drone license at 14, so they could be flying drones all throughout. You know, that could be a draw to bring them into the school, keep them into the school, a real life, real actionable thing that they can contribute in that day, not one day when, you know, when you're in the real world. These kids live in the real world, you know, and that's my experience from being with them, you know, 10, 15 years ago when I worked in the school. And then, but I think I really needed to find my, you know, my role in this community. And I think having my dog team and now kind of bridging that gap with recording it with the drones is going to be the next step and the next challenge. And then we'll see what the kids identify as their next challenge and how I can support that.
Wow. It warms my heart to hear how much your frame is really around service. You're really thinking about how you can support these kids in this next generation. And I'm grateful for you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Another thing that struck me is just how when you need to be a pilot, maybe you need to be 18 or 19 years old before you can get into these programs. But to your point with drones, they can get excited and they can go and do something that matters when they're 14, like when they're younger. And what a great way to be able to kind of start engaging then, instead of having to wait until someday paying a whole bunch of money or someday becoming a pilot. And then you got to go through this big program. It's like, no, it can be in your hands tomorrow.
And they could be experts at the mini twos. Like I'm just using the, you know, what we use for the DJI, but you know, and then work up to the big thing. And by the time they're 18 and ready to, you know, to make a living from it, then they'll be all that more skilled at it, and it'll come more easily. And then, you know, they can help bridge those gaps with delivery, you know, of things and medicines and oxygen tanks and, you know, the vital things that we can, you know, that we need to embrace this technology and move forward.
Thanks, Phoebe. Awesome. Okay, I've got Tessie on my screen next. What excites you about kind of this next era of aviation?
I'd say, I mean, I don't know too much on the drone stuff, but just seeing where it's going to go, I guess. I mean, even if you look at planes, like back then there was no autopilot, and nowadays like there's planes that could literally put themselves on the ground.
Right.
They're kind of there for redundancy. So just to see where it's going to lead us, I guess.
Yeah, great. Todd, you're next up on my screen. What excites you about this next era of aviation?
For me,
you might be muted still, Todd.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. For me, I'm like thinking more on like traditional aviation with like the planes. One of the newer technologies is actually kind of old technology that's some companies are bringing back, which are stall aircraft, short takeoff and landing. So there's a company called ATR, and they're coming out with the ATR 42 600S, and S stands for stall. And that aircraft is like taking the current plane that they have and making it able to land at like shorter runways, because like that company, like a lot of their planes are being used in rural areas around the world, and they found that the runway length that they require to take off and land for that aircraft is a little too long, so they're coming up with ways to make it shorter. And they're also like other companies that are working on like biofuels and things like that, so it's going to be an interesting future coming along.
Yeah, I remember you shared that in the home that you grew up in, the landing strip is right out front of your community, and you can kind of see planes taking off and landing all the time.
Yeah, it's right in the middle of it, and it's like a 3,000-foot runway.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very short.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I'm excited to see all these new planes. We've heard of some of them as well that are doing great work, that are kind of thinking about new configurations of propellers to make them take off and land in much shorter areas, which will hopefully make it easier for some of these runways in rural areas. So yeah, looking forward to that future as well. Jenna, I would love to hear what you are excited about in this new era of aviation, even in traditional aviation.
Well, I don't know much about the drones, but I think it is really exciting, like just the capability like that they could have, and like moving forward, and just the cargo drone. I didn't even know that they were at that level yet with the drone. So it's really exciting to like see how far that can go and how much it can help out like everywhere, because aviation is really needed, and to not need a pilot would, I'm sure, like help a lot with lots of areas and make it easier to access.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that future. Just for remote access, I think for testing some of these things, we can't obviously do them in urban environments. There might be too high a risk, but there's great opportunities for challenges that are really needed. It's not just getting your food delivered faster. It's like we need medicines, we need diapers, to quote Gabe. We need these things up there, and the easier we can do that and the more cost effectively, the better. Wonderful. Okay, well, we're slowly approaching the end of our time. I'd love to kind of go in reverse order, and just acknowledging, so we've been lucky enough to take a look at the attendee list, but we have a large group of Indigenous youth, we have people from academic institutions, we have Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. I see there's a list of people that are in relatively powerful roles, both in the drone industry and in traditional aviation, that have joined us. I would love to hear, whether you're speaking to Indigenous or non-Indigenous or whichever group, I'd love to hear from the audience what you think that they should hear as kind of some closing remarks. And we'll start perhaps with Jenna. We'll go the other way around.
I would say for the Indigenous youth, just go and try, like go and just do what you can, because for a lot, like I'm pretty close to home relatively, but you just have to go and like rip off the band-aid and just go places that like do things that make you uncomfortable, and like move into that area, because once you do, like you'll realize it's not all that bad, or like it's like really great, like where I am. And in the industry, I would say definitely put more of a focus on having diversity in whatever programs, like whatever positions that you're creating. And a lot of that is training. So if you train people that are diverse or Indigenous or women, or you train them, then you can have them as those leadership roles and in those positions, like, because a lot of people don't have access to the training, and that's a lot of the problem.
Yeah. Great. Todd, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to share with any of the groups?
Not really too sure on what to say. Jenna like did a pretty good job on covering pretty much everything there.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Todd. Tessie, any closing remarks you'd like to share?
I think piggybacking off what Jenna said, like, yeah, just do it. And it's a very rewarding feeling coming from a small town and like finally finishing all my flying. Like it's so worth it. Like it's hard. And I think that getting out to these remote I think it's all about advertising and showing people that it could be done is the biggest step we can make. And like they've said, like put Indigenous and women and put these people in these roles, help them get trained to put them in these roles, because I think that's the biggest way to help.
Yeah. Phoebe, would love to hear. What would you like to share with the audience?
I just think that if you think of a flock of geese, you know, where I live, and well, all of us live in Canada, but you know, every especially spring and fall, we see the geese. And since we're focused on the sky, the geese change in formation. So usually it's the ones in the back are the ones that are calling the ones in the front. And I think that's going to be a role that I would like to take. And that's, I think, you know, encouraging the ones to be brave, to go forward, and to say, you know, we got your back. I think that's something that I want to focus on. And I think in airline industry, we need to make those spaces and to provide that support for Indigenous women, Indigenous men, you know, to go and connect with the sky as well as the land. So.
Yeah, thanks, Phoebe. Gabe.
Sorry, I was stuck on mute. Well, everyone just said beautiful things, so I'm gonna end with an unbeautiful thing. Sorry, you guys covered everything. One thing I will say to any of the younger people who are watching, the aviation field, Todd kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. It's huge. There is so many things you can be doing. You don't need to be a pilot. You don't need to be a mechanic. There's a lot that goes into running planes, drone companies, cargos. A lot of the environmental nowadays, they use drones as a main way of getting data. Like, there is a lot that goes into this. You don't need to be interested in planes.
Right.
I love working in the aviation field. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot that goes into this.
Yeah, thanks, Gabe. Wonderful. Well, before we go into our final closing, I'd like to see if anyone has some reflections on what other people have shared. I know one of the things that shifted for me is really how important connection is to the land and how we can use technology to really connect to the land. And that goes for everybody. I think when I'm out in nature and out in the land, I just feel more connected to myself. And to one of the points made earlier, I was listening to a podcast. Gabe was sharing that in the Amazon, that's like some of the most sustainable practices. I was listening to a podcast of an Indigenous woman in the Amazon, and she said, you know, we had people come from the US that were nature conservationists, and they were trying to teach us tactics for how to conserve our biodiversity. And it was kind of a hilarious discussion in recognizing that this is what our culture has centered around. And in that moment, I realized, how did we go so wrong? Where are the people that are listening to Indigenous ways of being and knowing and connection to the land? And so I think what Phoebe shared really has shifted me more towards that and thinking about technology as an enabler of connecting to the land. Wondered if anyone else has some reflections of what other speakers have shared that they might want to share with the group. Okay. All right.
I hate silence, so
I will take,
Sorry.
yeah.
I will piggyback on you, actually, and I love what Phoebe said. And I will be taking advantage of what you said and try to come up with better ideas of getting the youth involved, about instead of just, you know, bringing drones in as ways that they can learn, actually tying it in with lessons. I find that really cool. So I will be bringing that up to people, not me, but them, to see if they can incorporate that. It's a really cool idea.
Len, I see your comment in the chat. David, perhaps. Oh, there we go. Beautiful. David was actually the one that brought it to my attention within our organization. He first had the observation and said, I think everyone needs to listen to this. And so we all gave it a listen. So thank you, David. Was there anything else, Jenna, Todd, Tess, that shifted in listening to other speakers?
I would say, just as I said before with the land as well, like I don't think it's talked about enough. So it's really nice to hear, and especially like different perspectives on it, because I know every First Nation's different. And yeah, I think just bringing focus back on like medicines and what we can get from nature and what we can give nature, and like how we can be sustainable when dealing with the environment.
Great. Yeah. Okay, I'll take the silence as a time for a good transition. David, perhaps you could bring up our closing slide here. In conclusion, I really want to bring awareness to the importance of our audience and really engaging in this discussion. There's been other panel discussions that I've attended where it's easy to tune out, but I've seen some really active chat going on, and I want to thank all of you for engaging. If you want to think about next steps, I saw some lists in the chat, so we'll certainly follow up with those. But what we wanted to bring attention to is for those people that identify as Indigenous and want to learn more about this sector, I really want to highlight that we're encountering some amazing organizations that are doing this work, that are Indigenous-led, some of which, to just name a few, are Esqueo Air, Indigenous Aerospace, FNTI, which has been recognized many times. We're huge fans of Joanne, as well as Sky Canoe, who you've heard from Gabe as well. And so those are just a few of the ones that we've encountered, and want to continue promoting those groups because they're doing such great work that's really grounded in their worldview and ways of being, which I think this aviation sector needs more of. For those that are less familiar with Indigenous people or ways of being, in my experience, we want to give that encouragement to not just initially reach out, but to do some of your own learning and avoid putting the burden of education on the groups that you connect with. So in my experience, what we've found helpful is some programs like Coursera. U of A has an incredible course called Indigenous Canada. We've done some great work with Indigenous Power and Indigenous Clean Energy. They're an awesome organization to connect with and learn more. As well as other training institutions, FNTI, Raven Institute, or even if you want to set something up on your own with friends to learn more that's a little more casual. What we've done at our organization is we've organized book or movie clubs where kind of you have these things that you'll either read through or watch, and then you'll just have a discussion about what moved or shifted for you. So my only encouragement as a person of settler legacy would be to engage in these on your own terms. There's many resources to start that conversation so that you don't put that burden on Indigenous community groups and put it all on them. You at least have some context in your effort to really build an effective relationship. So with that, I'd like to close with one of my favorite activities that we were introduced to by Tira Fraser of Esqueo Air. It's called 2 breaths, 2 words. So I'll ask, well, the way that it goes is kind of close our eyes, take 2 deep breaths and get grounded in our space and in our land. And then we'll share 2 words that really resonate, that represent the feelings of this session as a way to close in a good way. So I'll lead this, and as a participant, you're more than welcome to join and post your 2 words in the chat as we go along here with the speakers. So for the speakers, I'll ask you to close your eyes and sit with a tall spine. Take a deep belly breath in for your first inhale. And exhale. All the way out. Second belly breath in through the ground. And exhale. And when you're ready, share the 2 words in closing your feelings for this session. Whoever wants to go first.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
There's many possibilities.
Mm.
Yeah. So, and I just want to share, since I'm from Moose Cree territory and you know, we're talking about the sky, and I mentioned the flock of geese, is that you know, the ones in the back are the ones that call. So I thought I'd use my goose call.
Oh, amazing. Thank you.
So yeah, take care everyone. Wajay.
Thank you, Phoebe. 2 words.
I guess I'll go next. I don't have a good call. That's amazing. I'm really jealous, but community and growth.
Wonderful.
I'm going to say excitement and hope.
I can go next. land, and youth.
We'll say hopefulness and new opportunities.
Mhm.
You guys all came up with
Oh,
really
Todd?
great ones.
There we go.
I want to say generation and future.
Mhm. Great. Thank you, everyone. This was really a wonderful session. Thank you all for sharing your spirit and sharing your energy with us. We will certainly be back here next year to continue doing this work. We have lots of work to do in the meantime, and I just want to appreciate all of you for sharing, because there's a lot of attendees, I think, given by the chat, that are appreciative as well. So thank you all. Really appreciate it. Please enjoy the rest of your days. Take care.